Look at a standard calendar for the month of September. To the average person, it looks just like any other month. You see the start of the school year. You see the beginning of autumn. You see work deadlines. It looks mundane. It looks normal. But if you overlay the ancient biblical calendar, God's calendar, on top of our modern one, the month of September stops looking normal and starts looking like a countdown. Because hidden inside this transition from summer to fall is a date that has puzzled scholars, terrified ancients, and captivated futurists for thousands of years. We are talking about a specific window of time that God seemingly circled in red ink before the foundation of the world. Most people treat the biblical feasts, Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles, as nice cultural relics. They view them as Jewish holidays, beautiful traditions from a time that has long passed. But this view is dangerously incomplete. If you look at the original Hebrew text, these aren't just holidays. The word is moedim. That doesn't mean party. It means appointed times. It means a fixed meeting on a calendar. Think of it like this. For centuries, the nation of Israel was acting out a play. Every year they followed a script of rituals, sacrifices, and feasts. They were rehearsing, but for the longest time, they didn't know what they were rehearsing for. They were just following the stage directions. It wasn't until Jesus arrived that we realized the scale of this production. Jesus didn't just celebrate the spring feasts. He became them. He died on Passover as the Lamb. He was buried on the Feast of Unleavened Bread. He rose on the Feast of First Fruits. The Holy Spirit fell on the Feast of Pentecost. The timing was exact, down to the hour. But here is the tension. The script isn't finished. The spring feasts are done, fulfilled in the first coming of Christ. But then comes a long, hot summer. A gap in the calendar. Many theologians call this the church age. The time we are living in right now. Now, we are staring down the barrel of the fall feasts. 3 appointments remain. And the very first one, the next event on God's cosmic schedule, is the one we need to talk about today. It is the Feast of Trumpets. And many people are starting to realize that this ancient festival is actually a prophecy of the end of the world as we know. To understand why this day matters to you right now, we have to go back 3,500 years to the foot of Mount Sinai. In Leviticus 23, God gives the command, "In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath rest, a memorial of blowing of trumpets." In Hebrew, this is Yom Teruah. It literally translates to the day of the shouting, or the day of the blast. Here is the mystery. For almost every other feast, God explains why they are celebrating. Passover is for the Exodus. Tabernacles is for the wilderness wanderings. But for trumpets, silence. God simply calls it a memorial. But a memorial of what? He doesn't say. It's like he gave them a key, but didn't show them the lock. The only clue we have is the instrument itself, the shofar. If you have never heard a shofar, you need to understand. This is not a trumpet in the modern sense. It's not a brass instrument playing a melody. It is a ram's horn. It is guttural. It is raw. It is a piercing, soul-shaking scream that vibrates in your chest. In the ancient world, you didn't play the shofar for entertainment. You played it for high-stakes moments. You blew it to crown a king. You blew it to announce a wedding. And most terrifyingly, you blew it as an alarm of war. When the prophet Joel heard the sound of the shofar in his vision, he wrote, "Blow the trumpet in Zion. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming." This sound was designed to induce a physical reaction. It was a wake-up call. It was God telling an entire nation to stop what they were doing, look up, and pay attention. For centuries, every year, on this specific day, the air over Israel would fill with this blasting sound. They were practicing. They were conditioning their ears to recognize a specific frequency. They were rehearsing for a sound that wouldn't just echo off the hills of Jerusalem, but would eventually tear the sky apart. This brings us to the prophetic connection. Fast forward to the New Testament. When the Apostle Paul writes about the end of the age and the moment believers are taken off the earth, what we call the rapture, He doesn't use vague poetry. He uses specific technical language that links directly back to this feast. Look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. He lists three distinct sounds. First, the shout. The Greek word is kelusma. It's a military command. It's the roar of a general ordering an attack. Then, the voice of the archangel. And finally, the trumpet of God. This isn't a random instrument. Paul is Jewish. He knows the feasts. By saying trumpet of God, he is drawing a straight line back to Yom Teruah. He is telling us that the memorial was actually a preview. But Paul gets even more specific in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, "We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet." Pause on that phrase, the last trumpet. For years, people have argued about this. Is it the seventh trumpet of Revelation? Is it a metaphor? But if you view this through the lens of the Jewish audience Paul was writing to, the meaning shifts. In the synagogue services for the Feast of Trumpets, there is a very specific liturgy. They blow the shofar 100 times. But they don't just blow it randomly. There is a sequence. There are short blasts, staccato alarms, and wailing notes. They blow 99 of these blasts, building tension, building anticipation. And then there is the final blast, the 100th blast. This note is different. The blower takes the deepest breath possible and holds the note as long and as loud as his lungs can handle. This specific final note has a name. It is called the Tekaya Gedola, the Great Blast, or, as it was often colloquially known, the Last Trump. When Paul said, "at the last trumpet," his readers wouldn't have been confused. They would have immediately thought of the Tekaya Gedola. They would have understood that Paul was identifying the Feast of Trumpets as the prophetic timeline for the resurrection of the dead and the rapture of the church. The rehearsal was pointing to this moment. But there is one more piece of evidence that is so precise, it sends chills down your spine. It has to do with the hidden nature of this day. You've probably heard the famous words of Jesus in Matthew 24. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but the Father only. For decades, people have used this verse to shut down any discussion of prophecy. They say, Jesus said we can't know, so stop looking. But what if Jesus wasn't telling us to stop looking? What if he was actually giving us a clue? You have to remember how the ancient biblical calendar worked. It wasn't based on math. It was based on observation. It was a lunar calendar. A new month could only begin when the new moon was physically sighted by 2 witnesses in Jerusalem. Because the lunar cycle is roughly 29.5 days, the new month might start on the 29th day, or it might be delayed to the 30th. If the sky was cloudy, if the witnesses were late, you simply had to wait. You had to watch. Because of this built-in uncertainty, the Feast of Trumpets, which is the only feast that starts on the first day of the month, gained a nickname in ancient Israel. It was literally called the Feast of No One Knows the Day or the Hour. When Jesus used that specific phrase, he wasn't just being vague. He was using a Jewish idiom. He was winking at his disciples. He was effectively saying, "You want to know when I'm coming back for my bride? Look at the feast where no one knows the day or the hour." He was pointing them directly to the Feast of Trumpets. It is the only festival that requires the people to be looking up at the sky, watching, waiting, and ready to move the instant the signal is given. So, what are we looking at here? We have a feast designed as a memorial for a future event. We have a sound, the shofar, that signals the gathering of God's people. We have the Apostle Paul explicitly linking the rapture to the last trumpet, and we have Jesus himself using the specific cultural nickname for this feast when asked about his return. The puzzle pieces don't just fit, they lock together. This isn't about setting a specific date for a specific year. That is foolish. But it is about recognizing the season. It's about realizing that God is a God of order. He fulfilled the spring feasts to the letter. Why would he abandon the pattern now? The dress rehearsal has been running for 3,500 years. The stage is set. The actors are in place, and we are living in the quiet moments right before the curtain rises. The sound of the shofar is not just a noise, it is a heartbeat. It is a warning. It asks a simple, terrifying, and beautiful question. If that trumpet blew today, would you be ready? The Feast of Trumpets is the Feast of Awakening. It is designed to snap us out of our spiritual coma. If you are hearing this, and you feel a stirring in your chest, that isn't anxiety. That is your spirit resonating with the call. We are living in the shadow of the fall feasts. The summer is ending. The harvest is almost ready. And somewhere, the breath is being drawn for the final blast. Be watching. Be ready. Because when the Tekaya Gedala sounds, there won't be time to get ready. There will only be time to fly.